Could you tell us something about Fanny Brice, the character and the reality of Fanny Brice?
Sure. Well, you know, Fanny Brice obviously is very different. The story of Fanny Brice is slightly different than the musical Funny Girl. It was obviously changed for drama and also to make it more concise and you know, make it more of a musical. But Fanny Brice, you know, it's funny, in the film and in this show, they sort of, her upbringing was much poorer than it actually was in reality. Her mother was quite a successful real estate agent, and so she actually grew up less. I love how they quoted it once, folksy poverty that is portrayed in the show and film. And so I think that changes things slightly. Also, before Fanny met Nick Arnstein, she'd had quite some success before she was at Keeney's and all of that stuff. She'd had some success in the vaudeville world as well. And they sort of make her out to be much more innocent than she actually was, where she had quite a bit of experience, and both professionally and personally before that first meeting. And so that definitely informs Fanny Brice herself and how she became such a star in the vaudeville world. Whereas as Fanny Brice in our story, it's a little bit more of a Cinderella story, a tragic Cinderella story, but you know, kind of coming up from obscurity and becoming a star.
I have to ask the Barbra question. Do you find the memories of Streisand's performance, is it a daunting presence in the show?
It is, for sure, because people obviously associate this show and this part with Barbra Streisand. There have been many productions of Funny Girl, you know, since the original Broadway and since the film and everything, and I think more so than most other roles in theater, that Barbra Streisand is so synonymous with this part that I have found that it would be a mistake, I think, to completely ignore the fact that it is almost as much the Barbra Streisand story as it is the Fanny Brice story. And so, of course, I use her as an influence. She is an influence on my life and performing career as well. And so I take all of the influences that I have in my life and put them into the roles I play. So I think even more so in this part, I think to ignore it and to do something completely different than how Streisand would have done it, I think is not the way to go. She had such an influence on the development of the show as well, that what you see is partly her, you know, put into this character. And so it's extremely daunting, but I am up for the task.
Peter Hinton is creating what's been described as a revisionist version of the show. Can you tell me what that means in practice?
Well, I think it's really smart what he's doing. The show in its original form is, you know, it was written and staged for a humongous theater with hundreds of people in the audience, a 40-person cast and a 30-piece orchestra. And there are just not shows really created like that anymore, which is why this show is not done, really. You have to sort of recreate the Ziegfeld Follies and a mansion in Long Island, you know, in the suburbs, and it's a lot for a theater company to do. So instead of doing like a scaled down, cheap version of that, he has instead created something different. And so the piece is a memory piece. If you remember, it starts at the beginning and she goes back and looks at her life up to the point that things, spoiler alert, end with Nick. And so she essentially the whole play is happening in her mind, and so because everything takes place at this dressing room and it's all memories of her life, the whole show is sort of revolving around her dressing room, and all of these characters in her life are sort of ghosts of her past that are haunting her in a way. And so there are elements of these different places that she has been to that will help you feel like you are, you know, in a big vaudeville theater at the New Amsterdam Theater in New York without actually recreating the theater. It's how she sees it in her mind, which I think is a brilliant way of updating the show and making it accessible for a theater like the Siegel Center. And also, I think it makes it much more real for what's actually going on in the show. You know, it's not like these things are happening in the present; they're happening in her mind, in her memory. And so, somebody in front of me isn't necessarily that person; they're how I perceive that person. And so, so it's a really interesting way of doing it, but it's been working really, really well. And he is so brilliant that he just has such a clear vision. It's been really beautiful to watch him work.